The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the Montana sky in shades of orange and purple. Ethan Carter stood at the edge of his cornfield, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. The day had been long, filled with the usual chores of tending to crops and fixing broken fences. His farm wasn't much, just a modest stretch of land passed down from his father. But it was home. It was quiet, peaceful, or at least it had been until tonight. Ethan squinted as he noticed something strange hovering over the far end of his field. At first, he thought it might be a drone or one of those weather balloons that occasionally drifted into rural areas. But as he took a few hesitant steps closer, he realized this was no ordinary object. The thing glowed faintly, pulsing with soft, shifting colors like nothing he'd ever seen before. It hovered silently, casting an eerie light across the rows of corn. His heart began to race. Was this some kind of military experiment? A secret project gone wrong? He glanced around, half expecting to see headlights or hear the sound of helicopters approaching. But there was nothing, just the hum of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. Whatever this thing was, it seemed completely out of place. Ethan grabbed a flashlight from his truck and approached cautiously. As he drew nearer, the glowing object grew larger, revealing intricate patterns etched into its surface. They looked almost like carvings, swirling designs that seemed to shift and change as if alive. Then, without warning, the object split open, splitting into 3 sections that peeled back like flower petals. Bright light spilled out, forcing Ethan to shield his eyes. When he finally lowered his arm, he froze. Standing before him were beings unlike anything he could have imagined. They were tall, taller than any human, with slender limbs and smooth, shimmering skin that reflected the dim starlight. Their faces were vaguely humanoid, but their large, almond-shaped eyes glowed softly, like liquid silver. They moved with an unnatural grace, stepping forward without making a sound. One of them stepped closer to Ethan, tilting its head slightly as if studying him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, a voice echoed in Ethan's mind, not through his ears, but directly inside his thoughts. "Do not fear," it said. The words were calm, soothing, yet carried an undeniable weight. "We mean you no harm." Ethan stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. What are you?" he stammered, clutching the flashlight so tightly his knuckles turned white. "We are the Veil," the being replied, its tone steady and patient. "We have watched your world for many cycles of time. We have observed your struggles, your triumphs, your failures. And now, we wish to speak with you." Ethan blinked, trying to process what he was hearing. This couldn't be real. Aliens didn't exist, at least not in the way movies and books portrayed them. Yet here they were, standing right in front of him, speaking to him in perfect English, inside his head. His mind raced, searching for some logical explanation, but none came. Before he could respond, another figure emerged from the glowing ship. This one was shorter, with a more rounded frame, but its features were equally alien. It gestured toward Ethan, then pointed toward the sky. Images flashed in his mind, stars, planets, galaxies spinning endlessly through space. He gasped, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what he was seeing. "You've seen us before," the first being continued, though perhaps not consciously. "We have been observers for millennia, watching civilizations rise and fall across this planet. And now, we have chosen yours." "Chosen us for what?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. He wanted to run, to get as far away from these creatures as possible, but his legs refused to move. Something about them held him in place, not fear exactly, but a sense of awe mixed with curiosity. "For partnership," the being answered simply. "To guide you, to learn from you, and to grow together." Ethan opened his mouth to reply, but no words came out. His mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything. Why him? Why now? And why would these advanced beings care about humans at all? As if sensing his confusion, the being extended a long, delicate hand toward him. Ethan hesitated, staring at it as though it might bite. Slowly, tentatively, he reached out and touched it. The moment their fingers connected, a jolt of energy shot through him, warm and tingling, like static electricity but far more intense. Flashes of unfamiliar landscapes flooded his vision, towering cities made of crystal, forests where trees glowed softly in the dark, oceans teeming with bioluminescent life. He felt emotions, too, a deep sense of connection and understanding that left him breathless. When the images faded, Ethan found himself on his knees, gasping for air. The beings watched him silently, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the first one spoke again. "You will understand in time. For now, trust that we are here to help." By the time Ethan returned to his farmhouse, the encounter still felt surreal, like a dream he couldn't quite shake. He sat down heavily at the kitchen table, rubbing his temples as he tried to piece together what had happened. Had he really just met aliens? Was he losing his mind? Before he could dwell on it further, a knock at the door startled him. Standing outside was Liv Parker, a reporter from Billings who often covered local stories. She was in her early 30s with sharp green eyes and a notebook always tucked under her arm. "Evening, Ethan," she said with a polite smile. "Mind if I come in?" Ethan hesitated, unsure how much to tell her. Word must have spread quickly about the lights in the sky, and he knew Liv wouldn't leave until she got answers. Reluctantly, he nodded and let her in. "I heard some folks talking about strange activity out here tonight," Liv began, pulling out her notebook. "Care to share what's going on?" For a moment, Ethan considered brushing her off with a vague explanation, but something about Liv's earnest expression made him pause. Against his better judgment, he decided to tell her the truth, or at least part of it. "There's something you need to see," he said quietly. Liv raised an eyebrow but followed him outside without protest. When they reached the edge of the field, the glowing ship was still there, hovering silently above the ground. Her jaw dropped as she took in the sight, her pen slipping from her fingers. "What is that?" she whispered. "That's what I'd like to know," Ethan replied, his voice heavy with uncertainty. As they stood there, the beings reappeared, stepping out of the ship once more. Liv instinctively reached for her phone, snapping photos as fast as she could. Ethan winced, worried about how this would play out. But the beings didn't react. They simply watched, their luminous eyes fixed on the two humans before them. "This is insane," Liv muttered, lowering her phone. "Absolutely insane." Ethan couldn't agree more. Little did they know this was only the beginning. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a pounding headache. His mind was a jumble of fragmented memories, glowing ships, alien beings, and strange visions that felt more like dreams than reality. He sat up in bed, rubbing his temples as he tried to make sense of it all. Had it really happened? Or had exhaustion finally caught up with him, turning his imagination into some kind of waking nightmare? But when he walked outside, the evidence was undeniable. The cornfield where the ship had hovered was still flattened in places, leaving behind circular patterns that looked almost artistic. There were no tire tracks or signs of machinery, just smooth, untouched earth surrounded by bent stalks of corn. Ethan stood there for a long moment, staring at the marks as if they might vanish if he blinked. Liv Parker arrived later that morning, her car kicking up dust as she pulled into the driveway. She carried a thermos of coffee and a determined look on her face. "You weren't kidding," she said, handing him a cup. "I've been thinking about it all night. This is huge." Ethan nodded, sipping the coffee gratefully. "Yes, I know. But what do we even do with this? Tell people? They'll think we're crazy." Liv hesitated, glancing toward the field. "Maybe. But don't you think people deserve to know? If these beings are real, then this changes everything. It's not just your story anymore, it's everyone's." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. He wanted to argue, to tell her how dangerous it could be to share something so unbelievable. But deep down, he knew she was right. Whatever the Veil were, their arrival wasn't just about him. It was bigger than that. Over the next few days, Liv worked tirelessly to document everything. She interviewed Ethan multiple times, jotting down notes and recording their conversations. She even sketched rough drawings of the beings based on his descriptions, though she admitted they didn't do them justice. "They're hard to describe," she said, shaking her head, "like nothing I've ever seen before." Meanwhile, word spread quickly around town. Jake Miller, a local mechanic known for his loud opinions and distrust of anything unfamiliar, started spreading rumors. "Aliens, really?" he scoffed during a heated discussion at the diner. "Sounds like Ethan's been watching too many sci-fi movies." Others weren't so dismissive. Some folks whispered excitedly about the possibility of extraterrestrial life, while others grew uneasy, wondering what the aliens might want. By the end of the week, tensions were high and the quiet rhythm of small-town life had been disrupted. One evening, as Ethan sat on his porch watching the sunset, Arik appeared. Again, the being stepped out of thin air, its glowing form shimmering faintly against the darkening sky. Ethan jumped to his feet, heart racing. "How do you keep doing that?" he asked, gesturing toward the empty field behind Arik. "We are capable of moving between spaces in ways your kind cannot yet comprehend," Arik replied calmly. Its voice echoed softly in Ethan's mind, soothing despite the strangeness of its words. "We have come to answer your questions." Ethan hesitated, unsure where to begin. "Why us?" he finally asked. "Why now? You've been watching us for thousands of years, right? So why show yourselves now?" Arik tilted its head, considering the question. "Your species stands at a crossroads," it explained. "You possess great potential but also great danger. Your capacity for creation is matched only by your capacity for destruction. We have chosen to intervene because we believe you can rise above your flaws." Ethan frowned, digesting the words. "And what happens if we don't? What if we screw it up?" "That is why we are here," Arik said simply. "To guide you, to help you see the path forward." Before Ethan could respond, Liv's car pulled into the driveway. She stepped out cautiously, her eyes widening as she spotted Arik. For a moment she froze, clutching her notebook like a lifeline. Then, gathering her courage, she approached slowly. "Is this one of them?" she asked, glancing at Ethan. "Yes," Ethan replied, nodding toward Arik. "This is Arik." Liv took a deep breath, extending her hand tentatively. "Hi," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm Liv." Arik studied her for a moment, then raised its hand in a gesture that resembled a wave. "Greetings, Liv Parker," it said, its tone warm and welcoming. "You seek understanding. That is commendable." Liv blinked, startled that Arik knew her name. Thanks," she stammered. So, what exactly are you doing here?" Arik repeated much of what it had told Ethan earlier, that the Veil had observed Earth for millennia, studying its civilizations and their rise and fall. It explained that humanity had caught their attention because of its unique blend of resilience, creativity, and adaptability. Unlike many species they'd encountered, humans had the ability to rebuild after collapse, to learn from their mistakes and strive for something better. As Arik spoke, Liv scribbled furiously in her notebook, trying to capture every word. Her mind raced with questions, but she forced herself to stay focused. "What do you want from us?" she asked finally. "Are you here to take over? To study us like lab rats?" Arik's expression softened, though it was hard to read emotions on its luminous face. "We do not seek domination," it said firmly, "nor do we wish to harm. Our purpose is connection, to form bonds with those we deem worthy and to help them grow." Liv nodded slowly, processing the information. "And you think humans are worthy?" "We believe you have the potential to become more than you are," Arik replied. "But the choice is yours. We cannot force growth. We can only offer guidance." The conversation continued late into the night, with Arik answering countless questions about its kind and their intentions. Liv listened intently, her skepticism gradually giving way to curiosity. By the time Arik disappeared back into the darkness, she felt both exhilarated and overwhelmed. The next day, Liv wrote an article summarizing her encounter with the Veil. She included quotes from Ethan, sketches of Eric, and detailed descriptions of the events. When the piece went live online, it exploded. Within hours, comments poured in from all over the world, some supportive, others skeptical, and a few downright hostile. Social media buzzed with debates, memes, and conspiracy theories. Local news stations picked up the story, sending reporters flocking to Montana. Jake Miller, however, remained unconvinced. "It's all nonsense," he declared during another fiery rant at the diner. "Aliens showing up out of nowhere claiming they're here to help us? Sounds like a load of bull to me." His words struck a chord with some residents who began organizing protests against the Veil. Signs reading "No aliens" and "Protect our planet" popped up around town, and tensions escalated. A group of protesters even marched to Ethan's farm, demanding answers and accusing him of colluding with the invaders. Ethan tried to reason with them, explaining that the Veil meant no harm, but his words fell on deaf ears. "You're blinded by their tricks," Jake shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at him. "They're manipulating you, Ethan. Can't you see that?" Liv watched the confrontation unfold, feeling torn. On one hand, she understood the fear driving the protests. Change, even positive change, was scary. But on the other hand, she couldn't ignore the sincerity in Arik's words or the genuine connection she'd felt during their meeting. That night, unable to sleep, Liv returned to Ethan's farm. The two of them sat on the porch staring at the stars in silence. Finally, Liv spoke. "Do you think they'll leave if things get worse?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Ethan admitted, his voice heavy with worry. "But I hope not. They're offering us something incredible, a chance to be better. We can't let fear ruin that." Liv nodded, resolve hardening in her chest. "Then we need to fight back," she said firmly. "Not with anger or violence, but with truth. People are scared because they don't understand. If we can show them what the Veil really are, maybe we can turn this around." Ethan smiled faintly, grateful for her determination. Together, they made a plan to hold a town meeting, inviting anyone willing to listen. It wouldn't be easy, but they owed it to the Veil and to themselves to try. As the days passed, preparations for the meeting brought a renewed sense of purpose to Ethan and Liv. They reached out to neighbors, posted flyers, and used social media to spread the word. Despite the backlash, a surprising number of people agreed to attend, curious to hear more. On the night of the meeting, the community center was packed. Liv stood at the front, her hands trembling slightly as she addressed the crowd. "I know this is hard to believe," she began, "but trust me when I say that what I saw wasn't a trick or a hoax. These beings, they're real, and they're here to help us." Behind her, Ethan nodded, adding his own account of the encounters. As they spoke, Arik materialized near the stage, its presence calm and reassuring. Gasps rippled through the audience, followed by murmurs of disbelief and awe. For the first time, the Veil addressed the entire group directly. Through Liv and Ethan, Arik shared its message of unity and growth, urging the townspeople to embrace the opportunity before them. By the end of the meeting, though not everyone was convinced, a seed of hope had been planted. As the crowd dispersed, Liv turned to Ethan with a tired but triumphant smile. "One step at a time," she said softly. Ethan nodded, looking out at the starry sky. Somewhere among those distant lights, the future waited, and for the first time in weeks, he felt ready to face it. The days following the town meeting were a whirlwind of emotions. Some people left feeling inspired, eager to learn more about the Veil and their intentions. Others remained suspicious, convinced that the aliens had hidden motives. But for Ethan and Liv, the most significant change was happening within themselves. Both felt drawn deeper into the mystery of the Veil, their lives shifting in ways they couldn't fully understand. Ethan began spending more time with Eric. The being would appear at odd hours, sometimes late at night when the farm was quiet and bathed in moonlight. They would sit together near the edge of the field, Eric's glowing form casting soft shadows on the ground. At first, their conversations were simple, questions about Earth, explanations of the Veil's culture, but over time, they grew more profound. Arik shared stories of other civilizations the Veil had encountered across the galaxy. There were tales of species that had flourished under their guidance, building societies based on harmony and cooperation. But there were also darker stories, civilizations that had rejected the Veil's help, choosing instead paths of greed and destruction. Each choice has consequences, Arik explained one evening. Your kind now stands at such a crossroads. Ethan listened intently, his mind racing with possibilities. He couldn't help but wonder where humanity might fall on that spectrum. Were humans capable of rising to meet the Veil's expectations? Or would fear and mistrust lead them down a darker path? As Ethan spent more time with Arik, he began noticing subtle changes in himself. His senses seemed sharper. He could hear faint sounds from farther away, like the rustle of leaves or the distant call of an owl. His reflexes improved too. Once, while fixing a fence, he caught a falling tool mid-air without even thinking. And then there were the dreams. Vivid, lifelike visions filled with strange landscapes and unfamiliar faces. When he woke, fragments of the dreams lingered, leaving him with a sense of déjà vu. Liv noticed these changes during her frequent visits to the farm. One afternoon, as she watched Ethan effortlessly lift a heavy sack of feed, she raised an eyebrow. "You've been working out?" she teased, though her tone carried a hint of concern. Ethan shrugged, setting the sack down. "Not really. I don't know what's going on, Liv. It's like something inside me is different." "You think it's because of them?" Liv asked, nodding toward the field where Arik often appeared. "I don't see how it couldn't be," Ethan replied. "They said they wanted to form a bond with us, right? Maybe this is part of it." Liv frowned, considering the implications. She had always been skeptical of anything supernatural, preferring logic and evidence over leaps of faith. But after meeting Arik and witnessing its calm demeanor, and now seeing Ethan's transformation, she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. "Do you feel okay?" she asked finally. "Like mentally?" Ethan chuckled softly. "Yeah, I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. It's weird, but I feel clearer somehow, like my thoughts are sharper and I can focus better." Liv nodded, slowly, still unsure what to make of it all. But before she could press further, Arik arrived, its presence announced by a faint shimmer in the air. "Greetings," it said, addressing both of them. "We have much to discuss." Over the next hour, Arik explained the nature of the bond forming between Ethan and the Veil. It described the connection as a merging of minds, a sharing of knowledge, abilities, and perspectives meant to help humanity evolve. "This process is gradual," Arik added, "and it requires trust. Without trust, the bond cannot flourish." Liv listened intently, scribbling notes in her ever-present notebook. "So what happens if someone doesn't trust you?" she asked. "Does the bond just stop?" "It weakens," Arik replied, "but it does not vanish entirely. Once begun, the bond is permanent. However, its strength depends on mutual understanding." Ethan glanced at Liv, sensing her unspoken question. "What about me?" he asked Arik. "Why did you choose me specifically?" Arik tilted its head, studying him thoughtfully. "You were open," it said simply. "Open to curiosity, to learning, to change. Many others would have reacted with fear or hostility. Your willingness to listen set you apart." Ethan wasn't sure whether to feel proud or overwhelmed. He had never considered himself special. In fact, he often joked that he was the most ordinary person in Montana. Yet here he was, chosen by beings older and wiser than anything he could imagine. As the weeks passed, tensions in the town continued to simmer. Jake Miller and his followers remained vocal opponents of the Veil, organizing protests and spreading misinformation online. Signs reading, "Keep Earth Human," dotted the roads leading into town, and angry comments flooded Liv's articles whenever they gained traction. Despite efforts to foster understanding, fear lingered like a stubborn weed. One evening, Ethan and Liv attended a local council meeting where Jake staged a heated argument against the Veil. "These so-called aliens aren't here to help," he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "They're invaders, plain and simple. Look at what they've done to Ethan. He's not even human anymore." The room erupted into murmurs, some agreeing with Jake, others defending Ethan. Liv stood up, her voice steady despite the chaos. "That's ridiculous," she said firmly. "Ethan hasn't changed who he is. If anything, he's become more aware, more connected. Isn't that something we should celebrate?" Jake sneered, pointing at her. "You're just as brainwashed as he is, don't you see? They're playing you both." Before Liv could respond, Ethan stepped forward, his newfound confidence shining through. "I'm still me, Jake," he said calmly. "Nothing's changed except that I've learned things I never thought possible. Things that could help us, all of us, if we're willing to listen." The room fell silent, the weight of Ethan's words sinking in. For a moment, it seemed like reason might prevail. But then someone shouted from the back, "Prove it! Show us what you can do!" Ethan hesitated, glancing at Liv. She gave him a small nod, encouraging him to take the risk. Taking a deep breath, Ethan focused on a chair near the front of the room. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the chair began to rise off the ground, hovering several inches above the floor. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by stunned silence. Jake's face turned red with fury. "See? That's proof right there. They're messing with his head, turning him into some kind of freak." But not everyone agreed. Some attendees stared in awe, whispering excitedly about the possibilities. Others looked uneasy but intrigued, their skepticism giving way to curiosity. By the end of the meeting, opinions were divided, but the seed of doubt planted by Jake's accusations had taken root. Back at the farm later that night, Ethan sat with Liv on the porch, staring at the stars. "That could have gone better," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "It could have gone worse," Liv countered. "At least some people are starting to see the truth. You showed them something incredible tonight." "Yeah, but at what cost?" Ethan asked bitterly. "Now half the town thinks I'm some kind of monster." "They'll come around," Liv said firmly. "Fear takes time to overcome, but once they realize the Veil aren't here to hurt us, they'll start to listen." As if on cue, Eric appeared, its luminous form glowing softly in the darkness. "Your actions tonight were brave," it said, addressing Ethan. "Bravery often comes at a price, but it is necessary for growth." Ethan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I just wish it didn't have to be so hard." "Change rarely is," Eric replied. "But remember this. Every step forward brings you closer to understanding, and understanding is the foundation of unity." Liv smiled faintly, watching the exchange. Despite the challenges ahead, she felt a flicker of hope. Humanity had faced countless obstacles throughout history, and somehow they had always found a way to persevere. With the Veil's guidance, maybe this time would be no different. As the night wore on, the three of them sat in companionable silence, gazing up at the endless expanse of stars. Somewhere among those twinkling lights lay answers to questions humanity had asked for centuries, and for the first time, Ethan and Liv felt ready to seek them out, to embrace the unknown and discover what it truly meant to connect with something greater than themselves. The days that followed the council meeting were tense. Ethan felt like he was walking a tightrope, balancing between two worlds. On one side were those who believed in the Veil and saw their arrival as a gift. On the other were people like Jake, Miller, whose fear and anger only grew louder with each passing day. The divide in the town seemed to deepen, and Ethan found himself caught in the middle, unsure how to bridge the gap. Liv stayed by his side, determined to help him navigate the chaos. Together, they worked on finding ways to ease the community's fears. Liv wrote another article, this time focusing on the positive aspects of the Veil's presence. She highlighted stories from history where humans had overcome similar challenges, times when new ideas or technologies had been met with resistance, but eventually led to progress. "We've done this before," she wrote, "and we can do it again." But words alone weren't enough to calm the storm. Jake and his followers continued to spread distrust, holding rallies and plastering flyers around town. Their message was simple: The Veil couldn't be trusted, and anyone who supported them was betraying humanity. The protests grew larger, drawing attention from neighboring towns and even national news outlets. Reporters descended on the small Montana community, eager to capture the drama unfolding there. One afternoon, while Ethan was working in the field, a group of protesters showed up at the edge of his property. They carried signs and shouted slogans, their voices echoing across the quiet landscape. Ethan paused, leaning on his shovel as he watched them approach. His heart sank as he recognized Jake leading the charge, his face red with fury. "You've got some nerve, Carter," Jake yelled, pointing a finger at him. "Letting these things mess with your head, turning yourself into their puppet." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'm not a puppet, Jake," he replied. "They're here to help us whether you believe it or not." "Help us?" Jake scoffed. "By turning you into some kind of freak? What's next? Are they going to start changing everyone else too?" Before Ethan could respond, Eric appeared behind him, its glowing form shimmering faintly in the sunlight. The protesters gasped, taking a step back. Some dropped their signs, while others muttered prayers under their breath. Jake, however, stood his ground, glaring at the being with undisguised hatred. "What do you want from us?" Jake demanded, his voice trembling with rage. "Why are you really here?" Eric tilted its head, studying him calmly. "We seek connection," it said, its voice resonating softly in everyone's minds. "Not domination, not harm, connection." Jake snorted, crossing his arms. "Yeah, right. You expect us to believe that after everything you've done?" "We have done nothing without consent," Eric replied. "Your companion chose to accept our bond. It is a gift, not a curse." "A gift?" Jake spat. "You call messing with his mind a gift? You're lying. You're just like every other invader throughout history, pretending to care while you take what you want." Ethan stepped forward, placing himself between Jake and Eric. "That's enough, Jake," he said firmly. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I don't?" Jake shot back, his eyes narrowing. "Then why don't you prove me wrong? Show us what you can do, Ethan. Prove that you're still human." For a moment, Ethan hesitated. He didn't want to give in to Jake's demands, but he also knew that ignoring the challenge wouldn't solve anything. Slowly, he raised his hand, focusing on a nearby boulder. With a flick of his wrist, the rock lifted off the ground, hovering, several feet in the air before gently returning to its spot. The crowd fell silent, staring in awe or horror at what they had just witnessed. Jake's face twisted with frustration, but before he could say anything, Eric spoke again. "This bond is not about control," it said. "It is about growth, about helping your species reach its potential. But if you choose to reject it, so be it. We cannot force understanding." Jake clenched his fists, clearly struggling to find a response. Finally, he turned to the crowd, shouting, "Don't listen to them, don't trust them, they're dangerous and they'll destroy everything we've built." As the protesters began to disperse, grumbling among themselves, Ethan let out a shaky breath. He turned to Eric, his expression weary. "This isn't going to stop, is it?" "No," Eric admitted. "Fear is a powerful force, but neither should it deter you. Progress often requires patience." Liv arrived shortly after the confrontation, her car kicking up dust as she pulled into the driveway. She had heard about the protest from a neighbor and rushed over to check on Ethan. "Are you okay?" she asked, stepping out of the vehicle. "I'm fine," Ethan replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. Every time I try to explain, it just makes things worse." Liv placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone in this, Ethan. We'll figure it out together." Over the next few days, tensions in the town reached a boiling point. Jake and his followers organized a larger protest, this time bringing weapons, guns, bats, and makeshift shields. Rumors spread that they planned to march on Ethan's farm, demanding answers and threatening violence if they didn't get them. When the day of the protest arrived, the atmosphere was electric with unease. Ethan and Liv stood outside the farmhouse, watching as a line of trucks and cars approached, kicking up clouds of dust. Dozens of people poured out, armed and angry. Jake stood at the front, clutching a rifle and shouting orders. "This ends now," he bellowed, raising the weapon toward Ethan. "Tell those things to leave or we'll make them." Ethan raised his hands in a gesture of peace, his heart pounding. "There's no need for this, Jake," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "They're not here to hurt anyone." "They already have," Jake snapped. "Look at you. You're not the same person anymore." Before the situation could escalate further, Arik appeared once more, stepping between Ethan and the mob. Its presence radiated a calming energy, causing some of the protesters to lower their weapons instinctively. Jake, however, remained defiant, aiming the rifle directly at the being. "Stay back," he warned, his finger tightening on the trigger. "I mean it." In a flash, Ethan moved faster than he thought possible. Using his enhanced reflexes, he darted forward and knocked the gun out of Jake's hands before anyone could react. The weapon clattered to the ground, leaving Jake stunned and speechless. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Arik spoke, its voice gentle yet firm. "Violence solves nothing," it said, "but understanding can change everything." Jake stared at Ethan, his face a mixture of shock and shame. For the first time, he seemed to realize the futility of his actions. Slowly, he backed away, signaling for the others to follow. One by one, the protesters retreated, leaving behind a tense but relieved crowd. As the dust settled, Liv approached Ethan, her eyes wide with admiration. "That was incredible," she said. "You stopped him without hurting him. That's exactly what the Veil have been teaching you, isn't it?" Ethan nodded, exhaling deeply. "Yeah, it's not about power, it's about balance. And maybe that's what we all need to learn." Though the immediate threat had passed, the road ahead remained uncertain. The town was still divided, and rebuilding trust would take time. But for Ethan and Liv, the encounter marked a turning point, a reminder that even in the face of fear and hostility, there was always room for hope. That night, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, Arik joined them once more. "Today was a test," it said. "Not of strength, but of resolve. You passed." Ethan smiled faintly, leaning back in his chair. "I guess we did. But there's still a long way to go." "Yes," Arik agreed. "But every journey begins with a single step." Liv glanced at Ethan, feeling a renewed sense of determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not just the two of them, but the entire community. Because in the end, it wasn't about choosing sides. It was about finding common ground and moving forward as one. As the night stretched on, the three of them sat in peaceful silence, gazing up at the endless expanse of stars. Somewhere, among those distant lights, the future waited, and for the first time it felt within reach. The days following the protest felt like a fragile calm after a storm. While Jake and his followers had retreated, their anger hadn't disappeared. It simmered beneath the surface, waiting for another chance to flare up. Ethan knew this wasn't the end of the conflict. It was only a pause. But for now, the town seemed to breathe a little easier, as if everyone needed time to process what had happened. Liv worked tirelessly to keep the peace. She wrote articles emphasizing unity and understanding, sharing stories from other towns where communities had overcome similar divisions. Her words resonated with some people, offering a glimmer of hope. Others remained skeptical, clinging to their fears. Still, Liv refused to give up. "Change takes time," she told Ethan one evening as they sat on the porch. "But we're planting seeds, that's something." Ethan nodded, though he couldn't shake the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He wasn't just a farmer anymore. He was a bridge between two worlds, a role he hadn't asked for but couldn't walk away from. Every interaction with Arik deepened his connection to the Veil, bringing new insights and abilities. But it also made him more aware of how much humanity still had to learn, and how far they had to go. Arik continued to visit regularly, guiding Ethan through the changes happening within him. One night under the glow of a full moon, Arik explained that the bond wasn't just about physical enhancements or heightened senses. It was about perspective, a way of seeing the world differently, of understanding the interconnectedness of all things. Your species often views life as separate, Eric said, its voice soft and steady. Individuals against individuals, groups against groups. But everything is linked. Your actions ripple outward, affecting others in ways you may not immediately see. Ethan thought about that for a moment, gazing at the field stretching out before him. It's hard to think like that, he admitted. We're taught to focus on ourselves, our families, our jobs, our goals. Looking at the bigger picture feels overwhelming. It is natural to feel that way, Eric replied. But growth requires stepping beyond comfort. You are learning not just for yourself, but for those who will follow. That idea stayed with Ethan long after Arik disappeared into the night. He realized that his journey wasn't just personal. It was part of something larger, something that could shape the future of humanity. The thought scared him, but it also filled him with purpose. Meanwhile, tensions in the town began to shift in unexpected ways. Some of Jake's supporters started questioning his motives, especially after witnessing Ethan's restraint during the protest. A few even approached Ethan privately, apologizing for their earlier hostility and asking questions about the Veil. These small gestures gave Ethan hope, reminding him that fear could be overcome with patience and honesty. One such person was Clara Bennett, a schoolteacher who had initially sided with Jake. She came to the farm one afternoon, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she began, her voice hesitant. "For doubting you, for letting fear cloud my judgment." Ethan smiled warmly, inviting her to sit on the porch. "It's okay," he said. "Fear is normal. I've felt it, too. What matters is what we do next." Clara nodded, glancing toward the field where Eric often appeared. "Can I meet one of them? Just to talk?" Ethan hesitated, unsure how Eric would respond, but when he relayed the request, Arik agreed without hesitation. Later that evening, Clara met Arik for the first time, her eyes wide with wonder. They spoke for hours, Arik answering her questions with gentle patience. By the time she left, her skepticism had softened, replaced by curiosity and cautious optimism. Word of Clara's meeting spread quickly, sparking interest among other residents. Slowly but surely, more people began reaching out to Ethan, eager to learn about the Veil. Liv helped organize informal gatherings at the community center, where Eric addressed crowds of curious townsfolk. Each session brought new questions, and sometimes arguments, but also moments of genuine connection. Jake, however, refused to participate. He watched from the sidelines, his resentment growing as others warmed to the Veil. "You're falling for their tricks," he muttered during a tense exchange with Clara. "They're manipulating you just like they did to Ethan." "They haven't done anything wrong," Clara countered. "All they've done is share knowledge. Isn't that worth listening to?" Jake shook his head, his jaw clenched. "You'll regret trusting them. Mark my words." Despite Jake's warnings, the tide was turning. Even those who remained wary of the Veil acknowledged the positive changes happening in the town. People were talking again, not just about the aliens, but about their own hopes and fears for the future. Lines of communication reopened, bridging gaps that had formed over weeks of tension. One evening, as Ethan and Liv prepared for another gathering, Arik shared troubling news. "Not all of my kind agree with forming bonds with humans," it said, its tone unusually serious. "Some factions within the Veil believe your species is too volatile, too dangerous to trust. If tensions continue to escalate, we may be forced to leave Earth or sever the connection entirely." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "What happens if the bond is severed?" he asked quietly. "It depends," Arik replied. "For some, the effects may fade over time. For others, the loss could be profound." Liv frowned, sensing the gravity of the situation. "Is there anything we can do to prevent that?" "The choice lies with your people," Arik said. "If enough of you embrace the bond, it will strengthen. But if fear wins out," the unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. Ethan exchanged A worried glance with Liv, both of them realizing the stakes had just gotten higher. They couldn't afford to let doubt take hold. Not now, when progress finally seemed possible. Determined to act, Ethan and Liv decided to host a final large-scale meeting, one that would bring together as many people as possible. They invited not just locals but representatives from neighboring towns and even government officials. The goal was simple: to show the world that coexistence was possible, that humanity could rise above its fears. On the day of the meeting, the community center overflowed with attendees. Liv stood at the front, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "This isn't just about us," she said. "It's about the kind of future we want to build, for ourselves, for our children, and for generations to come." When Eric appeared, stepping onto the stage with an ethereal glow, the room fell silent. It spoke directly to the audience, sharing memories of civilizations it had helped flourish elsewhere in the galaxy. Images flashed in everyone's minds: towering cities built in harmony with nature, societies thriving on cooperation rather than competition. The vision was breathtaking, leaving many in awe. As Eric concluded its speech, Liv stepped forward once more. "This is our chance," she said passionately, "to work together, to grow, to become something greater than we are now. Or we can let fear divide us. The choice is ours." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then slowly, applause began to ripple through the crowd, growing louder until it filled the entire room. Even some of Jake's former supporters joined in, their faces reflecting a mix of hope and determination. Jake himself remained silent, standing near the back with his arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, but for the first time, there was no anger in his eyes, only uncertainty. After the meeting, Ethan approached Jake, extending a hand. "It's not too late," he said simply. "You don't have to agree with everything, but you're still part of this community." Jake stared at Ethan's hand for a long moment before finally shaking it. "I still don't trust them," he admitted gruffly. "But maybe I don't have to. Not yet." It wasn't a full victory, but it was a start. As the crowd dispersed, Ethan turned to Liv, a tired but triumphant smile on his face. "We did it," he said softly. "At least for now." Liv nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "Yeah. And this is just the beginning." That night, as Ethan stood outside watching the stars, Eric appeared beside him. "You have taken a significant step," it said. "Though challenges remain, the path forward is clearer." Ethan sighed, feeling a mix of relief and resolve. "It won't always be easy," he said, "but I think we're ready." "Yes," Eric replied. "Together, we will watch new civilizations rise." As the being faded into the darkness, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever the future held, he knew they would face it, not just as humans, but as part of something greater. The weeks that followed the large meeting marked a turning point for the town, and for humanity. Slowly but surely, people began to embrace the idea of coexistence with the Veil. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of doubt and resistance, especially from those like Jake who struggled to let go of their fears. But overall, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations became less heated, and curiosity replaced hostility in many hearts. Ethan noticed the change most clearly on his farm. Neighbors who had once avoided him now stopped by to chat or offer help with chores. Clara Bennett brought her students out for field trips, using the flattened patterns in the cornfield as a teaching tool about unity and understanding. Even Jake showed up one afternoon, awkwardly offering to fix a broken tractor. "It's the least I can do," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. Ethan accepted the gesture with a nod, knowing it was a small but meaningful step toward healing. Liv continued documenting everything, her articles reaching audiences far beyond Montana. She wrote about the protests, the meetings, and the growing bond between humans and the Veil. Her words painted a picture of hope, showing readers that even in the face of fear and uncertainty, progress was possible. The feedback she received varied. Some praised her courage while others accused her of being naive. But Liv didn't let the criticism deter her. "If we don't try," she told Ethan one evening, "we'll never know what could have been." As trust grew, so did the connection between the Veil and humanity. Arik spent more time with Ethan, guiding him through the final stages of the AO bond. Ethan's abilities reached new heights. He could sense emotions in others, predict outcomes before they happened, and even communicate telepathically over short distances. At first, these changes felt overwhelming, but Arik reassured him that they were natural parts of the process. "You are becoming a bridge," it explained, "a link between our worlds." One night, under a sky filled with stars, Arik shared something unexpected. "Our time here is nearing its end," it said, its tone gentle but firm. "We have laid the foundation for your growth, but the rest is up to you." Ethan froze, his heart sinking. "You're leaving?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Yes," Arik replied, "but not forever. Our departure is not an abandonment, it is a transition. You have learned much, and now it is time for you to continue without us." Ethan nodded slowly, though the news hit him harder than he expected. He had grown close to Arik, relying on its wisdom and patience during the most challenging moments of his life. The thought of saying goodbye left a hollow ache in his chest. "When will you go?" he asked quietly. "Soon," Arik answered. "But before we leave, we wish to give you gifts, tools to aid your journey." The next morning, the Veil called another gathering at the community center. This time, the room buzzed with anticipation rather than tension. People filed in eagerly, curious about what the beings had planned. When Arik appeared, it carried several objects glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. "These are offerings," Arik explained, addressing the crowd. "Not just for individuals, but for all of humanity. They are meant to inspire, to guide, and to remind you of your potential." One by one, Arik presented the gifts. There was a crystal-like device that pulsed with energy, capable of storing vast amounts of knowledge. A sphere that projected images of distant galaxies, sparking wonder and curiosity. And a simple orb that emitted a calming aura, designed to ease conflict and foster understanding. As Arik handed the items to representatives from the town, Ethan felt a surge of gratitude mixed with sadness. These gifts were incredible, but they also marked the beginning of the end. The Veil weren't staying. They were entrusting humanity to carry the torch alone. After the ceremony, Arik approached Ethan privately. "Your role is not yet complete," it said. "You must continue to lead, to teach and to inspire. Others will follow your example." "I'll do my best," Ethan promised, his voice thick with emotion. "But it won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is," Arik replied with a faint smile. "But remember this. You are not alone. We will watch from afar, ready to return if needed." That night, the Veil prepared to depart. Their ships descended silently over the fields, casting a soft glow across the landscape. The townspeople gathered to witness the farewell, their faces reflecting a mix of awe and gratitude. As the ships rose into the sky, Arik lingered for a moment, its luminous form shimmering against the starlight. "Thank you," Ethan whispered, tears streaming down his face. Arik tilted its head, its expression unreadable but undeniably kind. "No, Ethan Carter, thank you. Together we will watch new civilizations rise." With that, Arik disappeared into the ship, which ascended gracefully into the heavens. For a long moment everyone stood in silence, staring at the spot where the vessels had vanished. Then slowly the crowd began to disperse, each person carrying a renewed sense of purpose. In the days that followed, Ethan and Liv dedicated themselves to fostering the legacy of the Veil. They worked with local leaders to establish programs focused on education, sustainability, and cooperation. The gifts left behind became symbols of hope, inspiring innovation and collaboration across communities. Jake, too, underwent a transformation. Though he remained cautious, he joined efforts to rebuild trust, admitting that he might have judged the Veil too quickly. "I don't fully understand them," he confessed during a town meeting. "But maybe I don't need to. What matters is that they helped us come together." Months later, Liv published a book chronicling the entire experience. Titled "They Watched Civilizations Rise and Fall, Then Chose Humans as Family," it became a bestseller, sparking conversations worldwide. Readers marveled at the story of ordinary people rising to meet extraordinary circumstances, finding strength in unity and compassion. Ethan returned to his farm, but he was no longer the same man who had stumbled upon a glowing ship in his field. He carried the lessons of the Veil with him, sharing their wisdom with anyone willing to listen. His bond with Eric may have ended, but the impact it had on his life, and on humanity, would endure for generations. One evening, as Ethan sat on his porch watching the sunset, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but he believed in humanity's ability to adapt, to learn, and to grow. The Veil had shown them the way. Now it was up to humans to take the next steps. Somewhere among the stars, Arik watched silently, confident that its faith in humanity had not been misplaced. Together, across the vast expanse of space and time, two species would continue to shape a brighter future, not as strangers, but as family.